to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to be reviewing Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets while I create a makeup look inspired by it. So we're going to do a real quick summary of the book, semi-spoiler free, while I do my skincare. So, first things first, this book pretty much starts / continues the pattern of starting pretty much with the school year. So it starts at Harry's birthday or close to around there. It goes pretty much through the entirety of the school year and ends pretty much on the Hogwarts Express on the way out. At the beginning of the book, Harry is about to turn 12 and he has had a pretty terrible summer at the Dursleys. He's just struggling to survive pretty much. Can't really do magic homework because obviously the Dursleys hate anything to do with magic. The summer is going poorly. Right at the end of the summer, the Dursleys are having this big giant dinner with someone that Mr. Dursley is hoping to get into a business deal, and this house elf named Dobby shows up and pretty much from Harry's perspective ruins everything and says, "Harry, you cannot go back to school, something terrible is happening." So of course Harry ends up going back to school through some shenanigans like the wall just blocking him trying to get on platform 9 3/4, but through the help of a flying car and narrowly escaping a tree called the Whomping Willow, they do manage to make it back to school. Now unfortunately, the trouble does not end there for poor Harry. All throughout the book, all of this creepy, weird stuff goes on. Students are getting petrified because of something called the Chamber of Secrets is being opened, and it targets half-bloods or muggle-born students. So basically anyone who is not of pure magical blood. Apparently this chamber had been opened 50 years prior and ended up killing a student the previous time. So Harry, Ron, and Hermione are trying throughout the book to figure out the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets, what happened before, what changed to make it open again now, and all of this creepy stuff. They're worried that the school might close down, everything is falling to crap. So basically at the end of the book it all culminates in this one final big moment. There's a really cool twist at the end. And then, of course, for the most part, as in the early books, everything turns out okay and they go home for the summer. Alright, so today my makeup is Slytherin inspired, which makes sense because only the heir of Slytherin could open the Chamber of Secrets. Given that Slytherin is all about ambition and cunning, I am going to be trying my darndest to have an ambitious makeup look today. See how well I can pull it off. Let's get started with this review. So first things first, I actually love the opening to Chamber of Secrets just because it so quickly gets you back into the world. So, you know, Harry is under his covers trying to do his homework by night because the Dursleys don't allow him to do it by day. You know, they've locked away pretty much all of his school stuff, all of his magic stuff, and they're just like, well, sucks to be you. Basically. Harry is doing his best to make the best of the situation, and, you know, just when he thinks things are maybe going okay, Dobby shows up. Now, we have not really been overly introduced to house elves or really a lot of magical creatures in the first book. You know, we were focusing so much on getting used to the wizarding world and Hogwarts at large that, you know, any mention of magical creatures other than Norbert the dragon were kind of glossed over. Specifically the magical creatures that actually interact with the wizarding world on a fairly day-to-day basis. So if you're kind of thinking of house elves as this kind of Tolkien-esque inspired, very elegant and magical, powerful beings that are sort of ethereal and otherworldly, you're probably going to be a little bit taken aback by JK Rowling's take on elves. They're more gnomish, goblinish. I don't know quite how to describe them. They have these big ears, kind of grayish skin. They're still very magical, still very powerful, but they've been enslaved by the witches and wizards in the magical world. Right away you have this particularly decrepit looking house elf who is constantly, you know, berating, belittling, hurting himself because pretty much everything he does seems to be an affront to whatever his masters would want him to do. Because his masters are terrible, whoever they are. We don't find out until much later in the book, although you probably have some suspicions just right off the bat. Dobby is like floored by how Harry treats him just kind of like an equal, and this causes Dobby to freak out even more, like, you're even better than I've heard, you're even more good and kind than I've heard. And then he drops this bomb on Harry like, Harry Potter must not return to school, and Harry's like, oh, what the heck? School's the only place that makes me want to continue living because have you seen my life here? It sucks. And it's just like this little like battle of wills. And then all of a sudden Dobby's like, well, pretty much if you're not gonna agree with me, I'm gonna have to make you agree with me. So he like absolutely sabotages like the Dursleys' fancy dinner that they've been freaking out over, and Harry is like completely like left to blame for it. He's just like locked away. Not a good situation to say the least. I'm going to be using the Afrique palette and the Magic Mini palette, both by Juvia's Place today. I'm going to start off with this shade, a crease, try to give myself a little bit of a base. Anyway, so Harry is left to blame for ruining the Dursleys' precious dinner. He's locked away. Pretty much he has no hope of doing anything. Oh, another thing, so Dobby also intercepted all of his letters and messages from Ron and Hermione over the summer, so like Harry pretty much thought all of his friends had abandoned him, was kind of feeling hopeless and lost, which is terrible, especially when you're already in like an abusive situation and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, all these friends I thought I made just abandoned me. That's fun. Just going straight in for that green, so let's see what happens. So Dobby leaves poor boy on his own. He's rescued by the Weasleys and, you know, spends the summer there. Or, well, the rest of the summer. Like, as a start to the book, it's pretty dramatic. You know, there's no like, oh, Harry had a peaceful summer at Privet Drive. No, he spent pretty horrible summer. But, I mean, Dobby actually was being pretty serious. You know, things were going down at Hogwarts, some pretty nasty stuff. One thing that I love is, you know, I really love Harry Potter because of the way that JK Rowling writes her characters. I love Harry so much. The fact that whenever he's in a crappy situation, he tends to put others first. He doesn't really think selfishly. He just, you know, he does what he knows he has to do for the good of everyone around him. Like, when he's trapped in the Dursleys' room, he gets a single bowl of soup, like, in the day. And, you know, he's a 12-year-old boy. Like, that is not nearly enough to sustain him for any length of time. And what does he do? He drinks the watery part. And he shares the vegetables, like the good vegetables, with Hedwig because he's just a good noodle. And, you know, that's a trait that follows him throughout the books. He puts others first. He makes it to Hogwarts, and we're pretty much the only good defense against the arts teacher is Lupin. He doesn't show up in this book. Right now we are on Gilderoy Lockhart, who is a mess of a human being. Because he's just the epitome of narcissism in the worst way possible. It's pretty bad. Yeah, he's just a mess. He just should not ever have been a teacher. Like, I know he was the only one who applied, but like, it would have been better to literally have like Dumbledore teach it, or to have any other teacher teach it than to, I mean, Snape would not have been a good option, obviously, but like, as far as teachers go, like, he's better at relaying information to students than Gilderoy is. Like, Gilderoy is just a narcissistic idiot. Like, the only thing he can do, as we find out later in the book, the only thing he can do is the Obliviate Charm, because basically what he does as a human being is he travels around the world and finds all of these witches and wizards who do these amazing things, and then he takes away their memory, and then claims that he is the one who did all of these like crazy amazing things. And so people hail him as this like paragon of defense against the dark arts because he claims to have done all this stuff. He's also like the most cowardly person. It just, he, like I said, does all of these things to make himself seem great. And then, like, I don't even have the words to describe Gilderoy. He's just a terrible person. I feel like in Harry Potter, I either say they're a precious sweet baby or they're a terrible person. Like, there's not a lot of in between when it comes to Harry Potter for me. And in his first lesson, he sets loose like a bunch of pixies on the class. And keep in mind, this is a group of 12-year-olds, so it's not like they're your like 17-year-olds who are pretty competent wizards. Like, these kids have only been at it for a year. They have no idea what they're doing, minus Hermione. They start ransacking everything. It's chaos. Poor Neville ends up hung from a chandelier. Gilderoy's just like, hey, can you three clean it up? This was totally a success, what? So that's just kind of, that's subplot. Then you get the actual main plot. So there's the Chamber of Secrets. So basically the whole thing goes around the heir of Slytherin opening this Chamber of Secrets, and like I said in the summary, it was opened once 50 years before. Something mysterious happened, a student died, there's something dangerous that's paralyzing students, everyone's scared, no one knows quite what's going on. The first person that gets it is Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris. So granted, Filch and Mrs. Norris are not the most beloved creatures at Hogwarts, to say the least. However, it's still pretty darn scary. I'm actually going to do my face makeup real quick. I will link everything I used down below, but I want to kind of make the review go a little bit faster than it has in the past, so it'll go faster if I just do my face makeup and then come back and finish. So, one moment. Alright, I'm back. I was looking through my notes, and I did have a couple of things I wanted to mention that are from more the beginning of the book. One thing I wanted to mention, I just love how the Weasleys accepted Harry into the family pretty much right off the bat. Like, there was no, like, well, just because he's famous, like, Mrs. Weasley just takes him in like he is one of the kids. Mothering him and all is just precious to me. I love it. Yeah, it's just precious. But yeah, so I just love that. Also, Mrs. Weasley in general as a character is just so fascinating to me because she's just such a firecracker of a woman. Like, I think most people would strive to be like her. Just the way she takes Harry under her wing is just, I love. So yeah, that's just an amazing portion of the book to me. Like, just all of that time with the Weasleys is just wonderful. Harry and Ron, you know, taking the Fordingle, instead of like waiting for the adults to like get them to Hogwarts, like they just take the flying car and go for it. That's like peak dumb preteen. I could see pretty much every 12-year-old boy I have ever taught, I have ever seen, pulling off that same thing. Like, I don't know why it's such a shock to like McGonagall, to Mrs. Weasley, especially Mrs. Weasley, having raised Fred and George. Like, I can't, I mean, I can understand why she was upset, but I can't understand why she was shocked. Like, again, just peak dumb preteen. So that was just a couple notes that I wanted to mention from the beginning of the book that I had kind of forgotten. Like, not overly, but like little bit from the beginning. Like, once the Chamber of Secrets is opened, like, Harry is pretty much fully convinced that Malfoy is like the heir of Slytherin, that he's responsible for this whole ordeal. And like, he totally has good reason to be, because Malfoy is a little prick. But the interesting thing that kind of starts off this whole series of events, and not the actual chamber being opened, but like Harry's like suspicion starts off their series of traumatic events, is the incident with the slugs. Oh, so I probably should have mentioned, during the incident with the Whomping Willow, Ron breaks his wand, which becomes a pretty big plot point throughout the rest of the book. So during this one incident, the Slytherins come up to Quidditch practice that, you know, the Gryffindors have reserved to train their newest Seeker, who turns out to be none other than Draco Malfoy, and like the Gryffindors are having none of it. And so Ron and Hermione, who have been watching from the sidelines, come up to see what's happening. And lo and behold, there's all this stuff, and then Malfoy calls Hermione the slur mudblood. Even though Harry and Hermione don't really know what's going on, they can tell just by the reactions of everyone else that something pretty terrible has been said, because they all freak out. Ron tries to jinx Malfoy, but because of his broken wand, he ends up accidentally jinxing himself and just like throwing up slugs for ages and ages. But you know, it kind of gets this whole thing started, gets the whole theme of the book started, where talking about prejudice, talking about, you know, kind of these different social norms in the wizarding world. So obviously the wizarding world is just as susceptible to prejudice and to bias as the Muggle world. It's still just as poignant an issue for them. So yeah, it's pretty terrible, but that kind of starts this whole thing off and starts, you know, Harry and Hermione and Ron realizing this whole thing about purebloods and half-bloods and Muggle-borns, and just, you know, all just starts the whole thing off. And then the Chamber of Secrets is open, Mrs. Norris is petrified, and the whole mystery starts off, and it's just interesting because, again, the whole reveal of this book is just done so well. I haven't read a book in a bit that's had a reveal done quite as well. JK Rowling just, again, is so good at drawing your eye to like all of these tiny details that you didn't even necessarily realize you needed your eye drawn to. So one of the biggest things that she draws your eye to really early in the books is Hagrid's umbrella. So Hagrid's umbrella contains the fragments of his broken wand. So we found out in the first book that Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts in his 3rd year. In this book we find out why, and we only get bits and pieces throughout the story. We find out halfway through that this is because Hagrid was actually accused of being the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago. Well, Harry finds this diary that through some experimentation he discovers belonged to this student named Tom Riddle, who went to the school 50 years ago, and so Harry talks to Tom through the book, and Tom reveals this memory that shows that Hagrid was supposedly the one who unleashed the Chamber of Secrets all those years ago. Now, Harry has some trouble believing this, obviously, because, you know, Hagrid's so lovable, he would never hurt anyone, but, you know, that's what he was expelled for. One interesting thing, again, JK Rowling just draws your attention to all of these little things that you wouldn't think would make a big difference, but they do end up making a big difference. So some of the biggest things are Ginny's just weakness or anxiety throughout the entire school year. You know, it's her first school year, so on a first read it's easy to kind of brush these details off, but then of course after you finish the book and you realize everything that happened with her reveal, you're like, oh dang. And then everything with Moaning Myrtle, you know, she's just the ghost that haunts the bathroom. You know, there's tons of ghosts throughout Hogwarts. On first glance, this doesn't necessarily appear to be any different, but then she ends up being instrumental to the story. Same thing with, well, the diary, it's pretty obvious that this is important to the plot. Moaning Myrtle and Jenny specifically are just two really good details that are spread throughout the entire book, and then once you get to the big reveal at the end, you're like, holy crap, that's why it all makes sense. And that, to me, is what makes a really good reveal. Like, it's hard for me to, like, kind of explain, you know, what makes a reveal good. Because, you know, people will always have different opinions. But, like, I've read some books that I think quantifiably had bad reveals. And so I think they tend to fall into two categories. One is the reveal that doesn't give you enough information. It basically gives you nothing to connect the story to throughout the book. And so when the reveal does come along, you're kind of blindsided by it and you're not sure what to do with it. And you're like, well, this makes no sense. And then there's the reveal that the author kind of thought you were an idiot, and I mean, not actually, but like that's kind of the way it feels as a reader, because they give you so many details that you figure it out like ages in advance, and then you're just like, oh, would you get there already? Like, it's not a good reveal because you saw it coming so far in advance and there weren't any twists. It was just exactly what you thought it would be. And it's kind of dull. It's definitely a hard line to walk as an author. Like, I give props to the authors that can do it well. It is a tough tough literary job to write a good reveal. But I think JK Rowling does it really, really well in this book. So, you know, throughout the entire book, you're trying to figure out a few things. You're trying to figure out, okay, who on earth is the heir of Slytherin? You find out halfway through it's not Malfoy because, you know, they make this super intense potion that, like, turns them into Crabbe and Goyle and poor Hermione into, like, a half cat, half Hermione. And they, you know, go talk to Malfoy and they find out, like, his dad obviously knows what's going on, but, like, he has no idea who the heir is. And then, like, Harry thinks, well, and practically the whole school thinks it might be him because Harry can speak parcel tongue, which is the language of snakes, which is not super common. And Harry, which he doesn't tell anyone but Ron and Hermione this, but Harry can actually hear a voice in the walls, like, right before the various people are about to be attacked. Ron's like, hearing voices is not a good sign even in the wizarding world. Like, this is ain't good. Just, like, throughout this whole thing, you're trying to figure out, okay, who's the heir of Slytherin? What is this monster? So partway through, you actually do figure out what the monster, well, not partway through, most of the way through, you actually figure out who the monster is, or Hermione figures it out, because Hermione's Hermione. And so Hermione, unfortunately, does get petrified right as soon as she figures it out, and you're just like, oh my gosh, not Hermione, not Hermione, not Hermione. Yes, Hermione. It's so stressful. There's, like, so much stuff happening. I think it's interesting, though, just how this progresses. So I think the book does an interesting job at looking at how people deal with prejudice, at how people deal with bias. So obviously, just coming from, you know, the human world, we have already an intimate experience with how prejudice works, with how prejudice affects people. And I think a lot of prejudice comes out of fear. When they kind of explain the story behind the Chamber of Secrets. So we learn that when Hogwarts was founded, you know, there were the 4 founders, so Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Helga Hufflepuff, and Rowan and Ravenclaw. So the 4 wanted to form a school for witches and wizards, and this was back when magic was still reviled, when witches and wizards were still hunted. There was just a lot of fear going on, and there was a lot of fear from the wizarding side, you know, about how to deal with this. And so everything went well for a few years, and then Salazar Slytherin decided he wanted to be more selective with who was allowed into Hogwarts because he did not have a trust of people who came from Muggle communities. So he wanted to protect the school and said, you know, he built the Chamber of Secrets, supposedly put a creature in it that would protect the school from those of Muggle origin. So obviously, in present day, where witches and wizards aren't known about, so therefore they are not hunted, it's not as big of a deal. And, you know, the wizards have integrated with people of Muggle blood, and, you know, it's, for the most part, all fine and dandy. But back then, it was a different situation, and so, in some sense, there was a justification behind Slytherin's fear of Muggles, because wizards and witches were hunted, were slain, were looked down upon. You know, there were legitimate reasons for them to be afraid of people of Muggle origin. And so what Salazar did is he kind of took it too far. So he generalized, which is another danger of prejudice, that you begin to stereotype. So instead of just having a fear of those specific Muggles that would be harmful to the witches and wizards, and not all Muggles, certainly, he extends that generalization and therefore creates a fear of all of those of Muggle origin. So one of the things I think is most important when it comes to social justice, when it comes to undoing the harm of prejudice, is education. So often I think prejudice is born of fear. And just as humans, whether Muggle or wizard, we tend to fear what we don't know. And so the wizards, they fear Muggles because they don't know them. They don't know if they're a threat or not. And so when we perceive the unknown, we're more likely to perceive danger. And what we perceive as dangerous, we're more likely to react with our fight or flight response. So either that sense of hiding, that sense of flight, wanting to hide ourselves away from what we perceive as dangerous, or to fight, to be aggressive, to be more violent. And so when it comes to the more aggressive side of that, that's where we see a lot of terrible, terrible things occur. And just as much danger can come out of the sense of flight, of isolating, because then there's, even more fear because it's more unknown, and it creates this cyclical effect of fear and prejudice and anger, and all of that morphs into hate. And so where Salazar Slytherin may originally have had good intentions, he wanted to protect his in-group, he wanted to protect his school, it morphed into this hate of all people who just so happen to have Muggle blood. It just created, as I said, this cyclical effect, and what turned into the First Wizarding War. So with Voldemort and all of them, really making things absolutely terrible for those of Muggle nature. And what I find interesting, you know, we learn that Voldemort himself is a half-blood, so his mother is a witch and his father was a Muggle, but he came at it from the perspective of, my father left my mother because he found out she was a witch, and so he took the side of all Muggles are evil and hating that part of himself that came from the out-group, and he decided to become powerful enough to just defeat all of it. And it's very, very sad, you know, to have it come to that point. But it's definitely interesting to look about, and I think it's interesting to look at it from a perspective that's different from our own, you know, because, you know, you can write as many historical fictions as you want. Some people are not going to get it. They're not going to understand how prejudice comes around, and they're not going to understand the struggles of those who aren't like them, of those who are different. So, you know, just here in the United States, for instance, obviously we have a terrible history with racism, both toward African Americans, Native Americans. We come in, we bulldoze, we fear what we don't know, and it's terrible. And this is the month of February, it's Black History Month. This is a month where we tend to review these things, where we look at ourselves, at the present, at how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. There are some people who aren't going to get it, who won't be able to take that perspective of someone else and understand their struggles. Sometimes reframing it in a completely different way is helpful. And I think that's one thing that Harry Potter does pretty well. So it's reframing all of this prejudice into Muggles versus wizards. It's something that is easier for us to sometimes understand because it's so completely different from our everyday experience. And so I think it's good that she explores this, that she explores how prejudice develops, that she explores the terrible effects it can have. This is all from the perspective of a children's book, from the perspective of children. And, you know, children, you know, they don't start off hating each other, they grow up in these prejudices. And so we can even see this with how house elves and other magical creatures are treated. And so we see different levels. You know, of course you have Malfoy and all of his family on this one end where their prejudice is very obvious. You have somewhere in the middle, so where people just kind of let things happen. So one example I've seen is how Ron, he's a pureblood, he's grown up with all of these things that he considers normal. So for instance, the treatment of the house elves, he considers normal. You know, he doesn't really think about if it's right or wrong to treat the house elves in such a derogatory and such a terrible manner. Whereas Hermione, coming in knowing nothing of this, obviously points out, hey, it's terrible to treat thinking living creatures in such a horrible way. They should be paid for their labor. They shouldn't be slaves. Like, she comes in from the outside and it's easy for her to see, but when you grow up in it, it's a lot harder to get that outside perspective. And so I think JK Rowling does a really masterful job of kind of framing all of this in a way that's easy for children to understand, to start unpacking. And I think that's really, really valuable to have that perspective from something that's totally different. And of course, there is absolutely value in seeing historical fictions or biographies of things that have actually happened in our past. But I think it's equally as valuable to have that fictional perspective, because sometimes it makes it a little bit easier to understand and then ease your way into the reality. Sorry, I stopped with the makeup for a second, but it's a very serious topic, and I felt that, you know, it's done pretty well in this book, and it's like I said, it's very serious. It's very sad that this is the reality in our world, that this is the reality in the wizarding world, but it's something that needs to be addressed. It's something that we need to talk about, and this book focuses on it. It hones in on what creates prejudice, what is terrible about it, how does it affect people. And, you know, my my viewing of a book on prejudice may be a little different than someone who faces prejudice actively every single day. And so maybe someone who goes through that may view this book differently and may think it's not done as well. But I think coming from a position of being a white girl, I think if I were to read this as a kid, it would open my eyes a little bit to the idea of prejudice that people face, and to be more open to reading other books on that topic, more willing to discuss it, more understanding of how fear forms prejudice. So now that we've kind of discussed all of that, and I'm sorry this kind of got super heavy super fast, I'll talk about some other stuff in the book that I really enjoyed after I figure out what the heck I'm doing next. Let's do a blush, maybe? Alright, so some other things in the book I really enjoyed. I mean, there was lots of things in the book I really enjoyed. You know, as always, I talk about my love of character-based novels. This one comes through. I love the further, like, just side development of McGonagall. So I love the moment, you know, after Hermione's been petrified. This is later on in the book, you know, Ron and Harry, you know, are obviously working double time to try and solve the mystery. And so they get caught out by McGonagall, and she freaks out at them because all of a sudden you see her entire aspect change, and she's like, oh, of course, I didn't think. And you just see this compassion come across her face because you know that McGonagall is under so much stress. You know that she's feeling so deeply for her students. She's also scared. There's a lot happening, but in that moment you see her hurt so badly for Ron and Harry. Under this, you know, strict, fairly stern, rule-abiding teacher is a person who truly, truly cares for her student. You know, she does everything she can to make sure that they are taken care of. And I just, you know, I applaud that so much. She's a straight up top-notch teacher. Another thing I love, I think, you know, it just does really well of kind of weaving together the different parts of the story. So, you know, you have Hagrid's continual love of creatures that most people would view as terrifying and or dangerous. So you get Aragog, who's an interesting character because, you know, he was in the school 50 years ago, and, you know, Hagrid's taken off to Azkaban, which is terrible, terrifying because, oh yeah, this book also gives you the start of understanding government corruption in the wizarding world, which is pretty intense. And pretty much they're like, well, even though Hagrid probably can't have done it, I have to do something to save face, so put him in Azkaban. I hate Fudge so much. But yeah, so there's all this stuff happening, and Hagrid's like, if someone was trying to figure stuff out, they might want to follow the spiders. And so, you know, Harry and Ron quickly discover Aragog, who is this giant spider who Hagrid raised as a 13-year-old. Kind of terrifying. He doesn't hurt humans out of respect for Hagrid. Except, you know, now that Hagrid's gone, he's like, I'm not going to deny my children fresh meat. And, you know, Harry and Ron are saved a gruesome death by their escaped flying car from early on in the book. Yeah, so they're very, very barely saved. Just Hagrid's, you know, Hagrid's care for all living creatures just comes in so, so clearly. And, you know, it kind of saves things multiple times throughout the book if you think about it. Like, Harry and Ron probably wouldn't have figured it out so fast if they hadn't had Hagrid's help. And, you know, even though, you know, Hagrid was convinced probably that Aragog wouldn't hurt them, which was a bit of a misestimation. Slightly. I talk often about how I just love Hagrid so much, and I will talk about it again and again. I do kind of love that Gilderoy Lockhart is such an intensely dislikable character that even the other teachers kind of turn on him, let him get his comeuppance at the end. Like, he's about to, like, full on run away, and the teachers are like, oh, isn't this your turn to, like, prove, you know, how good of a defense teacher you are? Like, this is right up your alley, isn't it? And he's just like, caught in my own trap. I love it. I love some good justice here, especially because he's an idiot throughout the whole book. I mean, he takes all the bones out of Harry's arm, for goodness sake, just because he wants to show off, and then he totally messes up the charm, and it's just like, can you shush? Also, I'm using the lipstick Mrs. Norris, and I'm really hoping this lipstick kind of makes me look dead, but it's called Mrs. Norris, so I have to use it. Like, I love the color, just not on me. I look moderately dead. Doesn't look as bad as I was fearing. Like, it could look a lot worse. Let's be real here. Okay, So let me talk real quick about the reveal at the end. So, I mean, I'm pretty much done with my makeup. I'll like spritz myself. As I already mentioned, I think this is a reveal that is done really well. Really well. Tail end of the book, things are getting serious, everything is falling apart. Ginny Weasley is taken. So as I mentioned, Ginny has been like acting kind of strange the whole year. You know, acting kind of pale, kind of anxious, and people just chalk it up to all this freaky stuff happening, and she's a first year and she's just kind of scared. At the very end, you know, Ginny tries to come up to Ron and Harry and she's like, I have something I have to tell you, she looks terrible. And then Percy comes up, he's like, ah, ha, ha, ha. And then it's like, you know, oh, she saw I had a girlfriend. Cause that's, yeah. Then all of a sudden, you know, she's taken, you know, all this stuff goes down, and so she's taken into the Chamber of Secrets, and they're like basically saying like Ginny's gonna die. Everyone freaks out, and like her brothers, like, you know, even Fred and George, who don't have a serious moment in their life, like they're absolutely gutted, obviously, you know, because this is their little sister, it's their only sister. And they're just like, she's the youngest, and it's like, maybe, you know, if we pay more attention to her, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Like, holy crap, how did this happen? Like, everything is just falling to pieces. Harry's like, we gotta save her, we gotta figure out how to save her, we have to do something. And so they are quickly trying to figure everything out. Like, they get down, they figure out that the Chamber of Secrets opens from Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Harry speaks Parseltongue, they get down, there's a little bit of a fiasco, and Ron and Lockhart are cut off. Lockhart accidentally obliviates himself with Ron's broken wand. Again, love me some comeuppance. So Harry proceeds on alone. He finds Ginny nearly dead, and he finds an almost solid, trying to come back to life, Tom Riddle. Tom Riddle, whose diary has been like a minor plot point up until now, all of a sudden very present, very real, right there, and then starts the whole reveal. So Ginny Weasley has been the one who has been strangling the chickens, has been leaving all the weird messages, has been, you know, opening the Chamber of Secrets because of Tom, because basically he possessed her because she like poured out her soul into this diary by writing it, and so he like stole her soul like bit by bit and was starting to like manifest back into reality. So then comes the reveal that Tom Riddle is, I am Lord Voldemort. Like, he spells it out with the wand, and it just like big reveal. Like, I remember that it was like such like, that makes total sense, but like also I'm flabbergasted. Like, I remember reading that just being like, ooh, that's a good reveal. And like even rereading it, I'm like, ooh, that's a good reveal. Like, it's good. So anyway, so Harry's like, well, I have no chance, but, you know, he is Harry Potter, darn it, so he's gonna try anyway, so he's doing his best. He's about to face a freaking basilisk that can, like, literally kill you with one stare. Everything is going terribly, he's about to die, and all of a sudden, Fawkes the Phoenix shows up, so Dumbledore's pet, and Tom Riddle laughs because he just shows up with the sorting hat. So he puts the sorting hat on, and he pulls out Godric Gryffindor's sword, and he does his best. Fawkes blinds the basilisk so he can't kill anyone else with his stare. So the basilisk ends up biting him on the arm, and he knows he's about to die. Tom is like laughing, he's about to take over, da 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 da. And for whatever reason, Harry just like, I think the exact quote was like, as if he had been intending to do it the entire time, Harry takes the like basilisk fang and like stabs it into the diary, and it like spurts with all this like black stuff, and like Tom goes like, no, you know, like full dramatic like evil villain, like, no, I'm dying, I'm melting, and he just like away. Fawkes saves all of them. Everything actually ends up okay. Harry saves the day. Harry fights his way out. He survives. He is a survivor. Beat Voldemort 3 times. He needs some therapy probably after all this stuff, but therapy doesn't exist in the wizarding world. Who are we talking? They just throw chocolate at you and hope you feel better. Anyway, that's all that it's aside. So then it has a really good falling action and resolution. So after all of this stuff goes down with Tom Riddle, after everything is figured out, after there's the joyous reunion with the Weasleys and Ginny is actually alive and everything's good and everything's happy, Lucius is sacked as a school governor. Warms my heart. And Harry tricks Lucius into giving Dobby a sock. and sets him free, which is lovely and beautiful and worth everything. So it's just a hopeful and satisfying ending after all of the drama of almost losing Ginny, of all of these students being nearly killed. It's just, like I said, it's such a hopeful ending, and that's what I love, love, love about the Harry Potter series, because you know, there is light even in the darkest of times. In summary, I wanted to basically just say, of course I'm going to say this is a good book because it's Harry Potter. It's very near and dear to my heart. I love it. I love the way the book reveals, you know, all of the drama at the end. I love the way it builds the drama, builds with all of these lovely little details that make perfect sense once you get to the reveal, and even rereading it, it's just wonderful. Like, I sped through this book. I ate it up. I was just like, give me the Harry Potter. Give it to me. I go to it repeatedly, time after time, to read it, and it just feels like home. Right now, of course, there are things that I don't appreciate. I wish the Slytherins hadn't been done so dirty. It's not my house. It's my mom's house. It's most of my best friends' houses. And I feel so bad that the Slytherins are always portrayed as the evil house. Not all of them are bad. Not all of them can or should be bad. But, you know, these are somewhat minor details. I just love the book overall. I love how it fits into the series. I love how it builds. There's some setup in here for the later books that comes into play. If you haven't read the series yet, if this is your first introduction, first off, that's brave of you to watch a video that is filled with spoilers. Props to you, I couldn't do it. But, you know, if this is your first time reading the books after watching the movies and you're just curious about how to get into it, again, I love the characters so much, and this book is a little more plot heavy because, you know, the first book is taking its time to build the characters, and this one, you know the characters a little better. You know, it can just kind of delve right into the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets, and again, I think it's done so well. I think it really tactfully addresses the issue of the development of prejudice in a way that children can understand, and then, you know, will maybe open the door for them to explore the topic a little bit more thoughtfully as you get into reading maybe some like older grade books or reading some historical fiction or biographies that handle this very, very deep, hurtful topic. But I think it's done pretty well in Harry Potter for being set in a fantasy setting. Overall, it's just really well done. Obviously, I'm going to suggest that if you have not read the Harry Potter series, please read it. If you've already read it, go ahead and reread it. It's just a nice, cozy, comforting read to return to. I am already getting ready to start rereading Goblet of Fire. I just finished rereading Prisoner of Azkaban, which those two are my favorite, so I am vastly looking forward to doing those videos. Cannot wait. Not that I didn't enjoy this one. I was a little scared about how this makeup look was going to turn out because, again, I said I was going with something ambitious. It didn't turn out too bad. I'm not too upset about it, actually, but I did my best, so I'm actually pretty happy with it. Yeah, I don't have a lot else to say, so thank you so much for joining me today. What is your favorite Harry Potter book? What do you think about Chamber of Secrets? Is it your favorite? Is it your least favorite? How do you think it handled the topic of prejudice and fear in the development of prejudice? I would love to hear your thoughts and comments down below. I would love to see how the discussion develops. Yeah, I just always love to see what people have to say about Harry Potter and about how fantasy or fiction books deal with real life topics. So please let me know down below. I am super duper curious. Other than that, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute joy and pleasure. If you liked this video, if you were interested in the topic, if you want to see more content or have suggestions for more videos, please let me know. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've seen. This month is going to be extremely hectic for me. I have a ton of grad school interviews, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to consistently upload, but I will do my darndest because I think this is pretty stress relieving and fun. All of that aside, thank you so much. I love you so much, and I hope you have an absolutely beautiful day. Bye!